Hello everyone, it's Becca from Becca Books and Bujo, and it is finally time to share my reading stats from 2022. 2022 was probably my best reading year ever. I jumped back into reading a lot, and I think YouTube probably helped that, but it was a great reading year, and I am going to share with you all the numbers. I love numbers. I was a math major in college, and so numbers and statistics are my jam. So I'm excited to share all of these with you. I apologize if I'm looking down. I've got my reading journal where I have some stats, and then I also have some graphs and stuff that I will be putting on the screen for you, but things that I'm looking at. And here come the dogs. So let's start with the biggest stat of them all. How many books did I read? Well, this is confusing because my spreadsheet tells me one thing and Goodreads tells me another, and I have culled through the list and cannot find the discrepancy between the two. So I am going with my spreadsheet because I trust myself, and I read 128 books in 2022. That's the most I've ever read. I think the most I ever read before that was 71 books, which was the year before in 2021. So crazy. My goal was 70 books, and so I reached that goal above and beyond. I actually got 183% of that goal completed. Those 128 books added up to 41,487 pages. Wowie. If you average that out, that is 3,457 pages a month and about 114 pages a day. So that's really good. I always kind of shoot for about 100 pages a day. So 114 per day is great. My average length of book was 326 pages. My shortest book, I could actually show it to you. The shortest book that I read in the year was Sea Prayer by Khaled Hosseini, clocking in at 48 pages. And then the longest book I read was A Breath of Snow and Ashes by Diana Gabaldon. This one was 980 pages. So crazy. But like I said, the average length of book for me was 326 pages. Now I'm going to tell you the craziest stat of them all, I think. The amount of hours that I listened to audiobooks was 821 hours and 24 minutes, which equates to 34 days. Now, I do listen at 2 times the speed or even more, so it's not like it was actually 34 days of my life that I listened to audiobooks, but wow, that one is hilarious. Okay, let's see here. My average rating was a 3.668. Compared to 2021, which was average rating of 3.8, I did worse this year, which makes me a little sad. I am going to put up a pie chart of all of my star ratings. Ooh, so let me scoot over. Hopefully there's enough room here for the chart. But you can see that 21.9% of my reads were 5-star reads, so 28 out of the 128, which I think is pretty good. But you can also see the blue chunks here are my 4 or 4.5 star ratings, which was about 36.7%. So I take it very positively that more than 50% of my reads were 4 or 5-star reads. I think that's pretty good. Then you can see my 3-star reads were 25.8%, my 2-star reads were 13.2%, and I only had 3 1-star reads, so that was only 2.3%. And again, you can see my average rating down there was 3.67, so not super awesome, but not horrible either. I mean, that's about average, I think, for most readers. Let's do a quick little monthly breakdown to see which reading month was my best reading month. The most books I read in one month was 17 books, and that was in the month of June. My average books per month was about 10 2/3 books, and the amount of 5 stars I gave per month was 2.25. So I had about 2 5-star reads each month, which isn't super great. My best reading month though, as far as 5 stars, not the amount of books, but the amount of 5 stars per amount of books completed, was March, when 40% of my reads were 5-star reads. My worst reading months were April and October, because 0% of my reads were 5-star reads. Kind of sad. And if you want to hear about my best book each month, you'll have to tune into my video that is coming on Friday, where I am going to put my books head to head in a book bracket to figure out my best book of the month, or the best book of the year, I should say. I will choose the best book for each month. I'll go head to head in a bracket, and I will figure out what my best book is for the year. And you can watch along as I put it in my bullet journal. Kind of fun. Let's see, what other fun little stats do we have? This was a fun one. The average days to finish a book. It took me about 12 days to finish a book, which seems long. I felt like I finished books way faster than that. I thought I was finishing a book like every 4 or 5 days, but I guess it takes me 12 days to finish a book. At least that's what this spreadsheet says. I use Hardback Hoarders spreadsheet, by the way. We will look at another chart. Look at the genres that I read from. So you can see the most read from genre for me is contemporary at 32%. Next up was romance at 14.1%. Then it was fantasy, which is crazy to me. I don't feel like I read fantasy very much, but that was at 11.7%. And then historical was at 10.9%. So those were my top 4 genres, which I think is, I mean, contemporary, romance, and historical, I think is right on par for being my top genres. As far as audience goes, 68.8%, so right about 2/3 of my reads were for adult. And then 15.6% and 15.6% each for YA and for middle grade. So again, you can see all this in these beautiful charts that are in the spreadsheet that I use. As far as the format I read these books in, I had to create a different spread or a different pie chart because the spreadsheet that I use does not account for like combination, and I like to see the amount of books I read both physically and audibly at the same time. So 38 of my 128 reads were physical, which was about 29.6%. 10 of them were strictly ebook, which was only 7.8%. 28 of them were on audio, just listening. That was 21.9% of my reads. And then a combination of the two, combination of audio and physical, was 52 of my reads, which was 40.6%. I feel like having the book available to me in multiple ways, listening, first and foremost, when I'm playing with my kids, I can easily listen to a book instead of having the book open in front of me because my kids will just be all over me trying to get to that book. So if I can listen to it, that really helps. But then I can read it physically at night before I go to bed or after my kids go to bed. So I think reading a book in a combination of formats is going to be a win for me because I think it helped me have a really great reading year. Let's jump to where I got these books. It looks like the highest percentage of books that I read were from the library, which makes sense. I get a lot of books from the library, especially new releases that I don't want to purchase necessarily, spend the money on if I don't know that I'm going to like it. But then also I use Libby like none other, so I counted Libby in the library. And then the next biggest slice of the pie was my owned books, 32.8%. So that's really good. I want to get my owned TBR down, so that's good. Others were Book of the Month, which technically are owned books too. Scribd, borrowed books, and gifted books, which again are owned books. So that's always fun. I hope that my owned book slice is bigger next year because I would love to read down my physical TBR. Next, this one was crazy to me. This is my series stats. I didn't think I read a lot of series, but when you look at this pie chart, you will see that, oh, never mind. I was looking had it reverse. My pie chart is correct in my thinking. 68% of the books that I read were standalone and 32% of them were a part of a series. So that checks out with what I thought. I always like to look at this little statistic where if the author was a new to me author or an author that I'd read before. So 57% of the authors I read were completely new to me, so more than half, and 43% I had read before. So that's, I mean, it's usually pretty evenly split, but I like to see that I'm reading new authors. I think that that's always good for me to branch out and see what other authors have to offer. Next, we'll look at the author's identity. And now this one, it's kind of hard to know author's identity, but I did it based on the pronouns that they used in their author bio, or did a little research. So as you can see on this graph, 68% of the books that I read were written by people who used she, her pronouns. And then the next biggest category was 21.9% written by men or people who use he, him pronouns. And then I had 8.6% written by people who use they, them pronouns, and just a small sliver there was unknown, that I didn't know the gender of the author. And then lastly, we will look at the author's race. And Hardback Hoarder did come out and say that her spreadsheet didn't account for biracial, multiracial. I understand that, but I did mostly want to look at this to see how much I read from white authors versus people of color, and it's abysmal, guys. 71.1% of the authors that I read from were white. I need to do better. I've got to diversify my reading and read by more Black, Indigenous, people of color authors, because this looks pretty sad. I'll do better. I hope that my white piece of the pie is smaller next year, and I've got some other colors represented in this pie chart next year. And lastly, this one doesn't really make sense to me to look at because it's all over the board, but the year that the books were published that I read. So mostly this one, I just like to look at the year that I read from most. So it looks like 17 of the books I read were from 2021, 16 of the books I read were from 2022. So I was reading fairly new releases. And then the next biggest chunk of the pie is 2020, and then 2018. So again, I'm reading fairly new books. The next looked like 2017 and 2015. Yeah, I'm reading new books mostly, not much from the past. But let's see, the oldest book I read was 1992. That must have been A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. I thought that was the 40s. Oh, it's some of these small ones up here that aren't written. So again, not the greatest graph to look at. I think it should be more in like chunks of time instead of every single year, but I'm not going to change that. So those are my stats. Was there anything else? Oh, another just interesting thing. 5 of the 128 books that I read were rereads. So yeah, that was my reading year. I'm really proud of my reading year. Other than those few things that I wanted to change, making my Black, Indigenous, person of color pie pieces bigger than the white author would be great. Otherwise, pretty good reading year, I have to say. My bookish goals are up on the channel. I made a video a while ago, and so I will link that up above in case you are interested in what I hope to accomplish in my reading life in 2023. Otherwise, let me know down in the comments how many books you read in 2022, and if you have a goal for 2023. I'd love to have some bookish conversation with you down below. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. Like this video on your way out. Consider subscribing to my channel if you would like to see more bookish and bullet journaling content from me, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.